Good morning. Hi. Perfect. So we're here, Earth Day. Yay, it's Earth Day today. Panel discussion. Thank you for making the time to join us today. I know everyone is so busy. I'm so grateful. We have 4 panelists with us, and we have all of you. We have over 30 people registered. So that just warmed my heart so much. Thank you. And we are doing this webinar, this presentation on behalf of the Career Learning and Development Department. And as we get started here, I would like all of us to ground our feet on the floor, maybe take a deep breath. I know you're everywhere in the world, everywhere in Canada. So for us here, it's morning. Maybe for you, it's afternoon. And we just need a little break, right? To be present for 60 minutes together. So do anything you need to do. Maybe you stretch, maybe you move, but we ground our feet to really do the land acknowledgement all together. I want to acknowledge that Railroad University is on the territory of the Lagwagan-speaking people known as the Sunhi and Esquimalt Nation. So it's with deep, deep gratitude that we love, learn, live, play, work here on those traditional lands where the past, present, and future of Indigenous people come together. And if you know the Indigenous land you're joining us from, please put a little note in the chat. And I want to say that I'm so grateful. I've been working at Railroads for 6 years now, and I'm learning so much with my Indigenous colleagues, Indigenous staff, students, faculty. Like it's just, I love the knowledge sharing, and I have still a lot to learn. So thank you everyone for being here and doing the land acknowledgement with me. So the agenda for today, exciting time. We'll talk briefly about the Career Innovation Project. I'll introduce you to our 4 panelists, and then they'll talk about what they do to make this world better. And then we'll have question and networking. So I know some of you already connected with me by email saying that you have burning question you want to ask. So that will be your time maybe in about 30 minutes. And so why are we here today? And I'm sorry, I'm just letting people in at the same time. Why are we doing this event today? So we're super lucky. We got some federal funding here at Railroads University to build events like this. So it's all about creating more initiative for work-integrated learning opportunities with our Railroad students. And we know that some students are on campus, most of them are in a blended format online. And why we want to talk about WIL, and it's about talking too about the net zero goals of Canada. So I know we'll have a discussion on climate action today, which is super related, but really the goal of this project is for you students or even our community members and staff really to get a little taste of what you can do in your career or even in your hobbies or maybe your next step in your career to really include Canada's net zero goals, talk about sustainability and climate action. And I really like that quote from the Assembly of First Nation. The climate crisis constitutes a state of emergency for lands, waters, animals, and peoples. So it's really bringing all of us together, right? It's like not just humans are affected or the water is affected, it's all of us are affected. And I think there's hope because all of us can do something to solve that climate crisis. And as we talk about Earth Day, I'm so impressed and shocked at the same time that Earth Day started in 1970. So we have been talking about this for 54 years, and we keep talking about it. So we're grateful to be here, and I hope we can have that kind of friendly discussion about how, as a student, staff, community member, we can do our part to solve that climate crisis. So for students, I love that graph. I know if I have some colleagues in the room, they will laugh because look at this. Like when we think about our career, right? It's like, what is my next step? And we can be mid-career, we can be in our 20s and just look of what I want to do in life, or we can be in transition. But here you are like doing a really good step to attend event and build your network and hear from our panelists and from each other about what you can do in your career to just be an ally, right? To just do things differently. And here are our panelists. So I might actually, instead of me talking about them, I have their bio written. Oh my God, so much knowledge in this room and wisdom. And we want the conversation to be fun. And I have Ali Greendale with me, Cindy McDougall, Judy Stafford, and Stuart Lele. And I didn't practice, as you can tell with the French accent, I didn't practice those names that much. But I think instead of me talking about you, I will just pass it on to all of you, just to maybe introduce who you are. How did you end up working in sustainability, climate action, food security? So just maybe a few minutes, and then we'll go into questions. I will stop sharing my screen, and maybe Ali, you want to start? Here we go.
Sure, thanks, Nancy, and hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day. Thank you to Nancy and Rural Roads for having me here. I was just chatting with Nancy before that I'm a recent graduate alongside Nancy from Rural Roads University. We just completed the Masters of Arts in Climate Action Leadership program. But today I'm calling in from Edmonton. I am born and raised from here. I currently work for the Otipemisiwak Métis Nation of Alberta doing climate policy work. I myself am not Métis, so I every day work to promote the Métis Nation's priorities, truth and reconciliation, UNDRIP, along with climate action. So really, really grateful for the opportunity to learn about Indigenous rights and sovereignty and self-determination and how that ties into land stewardship and climate action. And I grew up in Edmonton my whole life, right across from Fort Edmonton, which is a pretty one of the first trading posts in Edmonton and Western Canada. And I didn't really realize about the significance of that until the last few years. I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to work with the M&A and along with other First Nations, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux communities in Treaty 6 where I am, along with the Métis Nation. And yeah, I guess the other part of the question is kind of how I got involved in this work. I'm sure like lots of people here, I growing up in Alberta is maybe a slightly different context. But I went into my undergrad and at the University of Alberta, and I started taking all these like ecology and biology classes, and they were all kind of ending on this really scary chapter about, pollution and like habitat loss and climate change. And it seemed so bizarre. And then I was going home or talking to friends and family, and people would say like, oh, it's like weird to get this much hail at this time of year. Like what a warm day. And it just seemed like such a disconnection. And I really wanted to understand why that was. So I started taking more political science classes, sociology, started working, and really just wanted to kind of understand why it is as a society that we can be so disconnected even when we have the science. And obviously I'm sure everyone knows it's very, very complicated. But yeah, it eventually led me to, like I said, complete the Masters of Arts in Climate Action Leadership program at Rural Roads. And now I work as a climate engagement coordinator and policy analyst at the Otipemisiwak Métis Nation of Alberta, where I really, really get to understand or try to understand where there are opportunities to promote, resilience and climate adaptation work, along with mitigation in Alberta, and how Indigenous sovereignty and the self-determination of the Métis Nation can play a part in that. So yeah, my job changes every day, which I'm, really thankful for. And yeah, I can be working on lots of things, which I think I'll maybe have a chance to share a little bit after. But I'll leave it at that for now and pass it off to my next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. And yes, Cindy, if you want to go ahead, and I'm glad that you love the picture I found, Cindy. That was, I think, when we met a few years ago at Railroads.
Yes, that's an oldie. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy McDougall. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the communications manager for the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, which is a 4-university partnership that's head offices at the University of Victoria, but also involves the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser University, and the University of Northern BC. We were founded in 2008 and didn't get to choose our unis, so we do some work with Royal Roads, and we're making those connections closer. How I'm here today is I worked at Royal Roads for about 7 years in the communications department. Fantastic place to work, wonderful people. And I came over to PICS about a year and a half ago in November of 20. Oh, no, it was May. Oh, I'm almost 2 years, Nancy. In May of 22. And how I got into climate is actually a bit of a meandering path. I'm no climate specialist. I am a communications person. I'm a former journalist. I started my career at Carleton University, where I earned my Bachelor of Journalism honors and then went on to work for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the good old CBC, in the Northwest Territories. I was there from September 99 until about June or July of 2008 when I came to British Columbia. I worked for the provincial government for a while, mostly in health and in specifically in communications and media relations and issues management. So when bad things happened in the health system, that was something I had to deal with. It was a great job, but very stressful. So I eventually came over to Royal Roads to have some fun telling the stories of the incredible students at that institution, including every single one of you. I'm a huge believer in Royal Roads' mission and really enjoyed myself there. But while I was there in 2021, the heat dome happened, and I have a medical disability, and during the heat dome, it hospitalized me. I actually had a heat-related heart attack. So during my whole life, I have tried my best, probably like every single other person here, to try to be climate conscious and sustainability conscious. You know, my family only ever owns and drives one vehicle. We cloth diapered our children. We calculated our carbon footprint. We did all of these things. But when I was sitting in the hospital recovering, well, at least 620 other people like me died. I couldn't just do the little things anymore. I felt a real drive to bring my skills in communications, in writing, and in storytelling to climate action, but I didn't quite know how to do that. So I started kind of looking around to see, you know, what kind of jobs are available for people like me. And luckily, I connected with PICS, who was looking for a communication manager at that time and who was looking for someone who had skills like mine. So I came on over here and I have been on an incredible learning journey ever since. When I came in, I had trouble during my job interview. I had a difficult time describing the difference between climate adaptation and climate mitigation, for example. So I was a real newbie, but I learned quickly and I got up quickly, and I'm here now in the process of helping PICS with a complete renewal of our programs, our website, which will be launching a new one in mid-June, and our complete communications approach. So yeah, that's me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Love this. Thank you so much, Cindy. And yeah, you're a great example of a lot of questions I got before the webinar is people are like, but in my current role, there's no climate action or there's no sustainability, and what can I do? So I love, unfortunately, that's a sad story, but that brought you to a wonderful outcome. Yeah. Judy, would you like to go next? And Judy picture was from Tofino, so that was a really shiny one.
Yes, I was lucky to go there for a little holiday break a couple weeks ago, so I love it there. So yeah, I'm Judy Stafford. I'm the executive director of Cowichan Green Community. We are a nonprofit located in Duncan, and our focus is food and food security. I've been here since 2007. So I actually it's kind of a weird story how I ended up here. I was 25 years in banking, and in Calgary, Toronto, I moved around quite a bit. Had really no knowledge of official knowledge of working at a nonprofit or the term food security. I ended up moving back here from Toronto when my parents were getting older and needed some help. I was born in Vancouver and I had lived in Souk when I was a child. So it was like, I always knew I'd come back eventually. And I decided I did not want to pursue a career in banking anymore. I'd had enough of that. And much to my parents' chagrin, they were like, you have to go back to banking. It was funny because when I saw this job, it was just a 6-month contract to write articles. I was also doing some writing. So my parents were very upset at me for taking a 6-month job. And I knew what I thought was nothing about food. But when you look at sort of your past other activities outside of your career, I had started a couple of community gardens. I had started an after-school snack program in a low-income neighborhood in Toronto. And actually, when I was moving offices one time, I found this plaque from the city of Toronto. I won a Food Access Award in 2001. Randomly, I totally had forgotten about that. And so I grew a lot of food when I was a child. So all of these things were in my life, but just I never considered them. And so it ended up turning out that I actually knew more than I thought I did. And the one thing I always talk about is how, even though you've been slotted in one sector, the transferable skills are what, is important in your life, and all the things you acquire along the way, not necessarily in your paid gigs. So when I started here, there was basically like one other full-time person, and they were actually going to close when my contract was over and the funding. They decided they were going to close. The founder had moved to Peterborough, and there was just no plans to continue. So I said, well, how do you run a nonprofit? And they said, well, you have to write grants. So I wrote a grant, got it, wrote another grant, got it. And here I am almost 17 years later, and, hundreds and hundreds of staff we've had over the years. And, we own 3 organizations now. So it's kind of a going concern. And just the sense that, unfortunately, really the need for food access has increased dramatically in my time here. I always say that the best thing that could happen is if we're no longer needed as an organization, but that's definitely not the case. COVID definitely proved that. We were extraordinarily busy during COVID, and that hasn't let down at all. Some of the programs we started as an interim, what we thought was short-term, are our biggest programs now. So the need is there, and so I guess we'll be around for a little while longer, just trying to fill some of those gaps. We do some food access, but we also really focus on education. We have 2 teaching farms. We really want to instill the fact that you can grow anything, even if it's just a tiny bit in your patios or backyards, or and we run a summer camp for kids, and so we want to get them when they're young, and just all the points in between. We work with local government. We got chickens in the backyard legalized in Duncan. That took 2 years, if you can imagine. Who knew that you were actually legal to have chickens? So we work all the way from policy to teaching kids and everything in between. So it's been a very exciting job for me. Certainly a switch from my career, but I love it. Very passionate about the work, and just so grateful that I stumbled across this little organization so long ago and have had this opportunity. We have, and also our ties to Rural Roads. We have worked with Rural Roads. We actually, one of our superstar employees, who was here quite some time, maybe about 6 years, she ended up going back to Rural Roads and got her doctorate in food security. So we're pretty proud of her. And we've had sort of interns and projects through Rural Roads that have been really helpful to us as an organization. So thanks for this opportunity to speak today, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Judy. And yeah, I see someone in the chat asking for the websites of all organizations. I'll work on it, or if you have them handy, feel free to pop them in the chat. Yeah.
We have 5 websites right now. So if there's somebody who wants to help us merge them down to 2, that would be great. Yeah, I'll put our main one in the chat though. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, Stuart, what a good segue to what you do.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for having me here. My name is Stuart Lilly. I'm the CEO and founder of ReFeed Canada. We are a nutrient upcycling company that is creating circular food systems, utilizing agri-food and industry byproducts as resources, really just tackling the common sense, the problems with the common sense approach. there's a missing piece of infrastructure that is obvious to me when we're looking at food security, food insecurity. There's a lack of that infrastructure to be able to recover, process, do things on a larger scale to create efficiencies. And how I've approached with ReFeed Canada is to really look at what's the problem, let's tackle it, let's get that solution done so we can check it off and then move on to the next project. Unfortunately, with food insecurity, that demand keeps on growing, which means that we need to dig deeper into the supply chain where food is coming from and really tackle more of those the challenges facing the stakeholders throughout the entire system, whether that be from the grower all the way to the food industry partners. I've got a background in waste management, started a waste consulting brokerage company in 2010. It gave me a unique insight into a lot of the challenges facing all the stakeholders in this system from a unique perspective. I don't see these things as waste, but that is what they're classified. I see them as resources that don't have a solution yet in place to be able to recover them. So along the way, I realized that so much of the food that was being disposed of, after 2015, we had an organics ban in Metro Vancouver. So much of what was happening in my area was being diverted to composting at that stage. That's fine. So much of that food should have been recovered for people first, and that's really what triggered the start of my journey towards building ReFeed in 2020. Had the opportunity to work with an insect technology company that was a startup in 2015 that was utilizing this now food waste that I had gone into the food industry, disrupted the control by the waste companies of this stream and diverted it now to insects. That was a step above composting. So what we now have is we have a hierarchy: feed people first, feed livestock, feed soil. Well, we wanted to bring that whole thing together in a common sense approach, and that's what I built in Langley in 2020, was bringing together the different pieces of a circular system that would be aligned with community and society, while demonstrating at a large enough level that we can do localized solutions that also are manufacturing the ingredients we need to produce food. So recover it, divert it, and then produce the ingredients that are needed to grow more food. And all those resources are available around us in our communities, whether it be from manure, whether it be from wood waste, whether it be from municipal leaves, organics, food that's just being diverted to waste streams instead of being recovered from the food industry. All those things have a common sense approach that we can tackle. You need the infrastructure, you need the solutions in place to do that. And so that's been the mission of ReFeed, is to bring all those, create that ecosystem so that we can tackle each pillar and create that circular food system to support local food security.
Yeah, and it's funny, someone is asking me a question in the chat and I'm thinking the same. What was the reaction when you started the company in 2020 from different government level or just around you?
Wow, that's interesting. It's been challenging. A lot of it, because it's circular, because I'm combining a number of different pieces, people tune out, right? It's too complicated. I don't see it that way. I see how logical it is, actually, how each piece connects. I don't have this background where I've gone to school in this linear type path. I actually, my education is hands-on, just doing the work and seeing where the problems are and just going after them and figuring them out, putting the pieces in place, bringing the stakeholders together. That to me is instinctive. So it's really, you get a lot of, wow, this is great, don't know how to support. Wow, this is great, too complicated. And so, I think we're at a stage right now where we have to start accelerating the solutions that we need in society. We can't just keep on having more discussions and let's have more reviews of this and that are going to take years to come to fruition. We have to start actually putting solutions in place and then iterating from them so that we can actually just keep on getting better and better through iteration versus recreation.
I love that. Thank you. And you make me think of, like, I see many students in the room right now, and all the experiential learning or the project based that student will do, right? To try to bring that kind of A to Z shortly, like to accelerate what we need to do. So
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid approach. Just like, let's go. Like rip the Band-Aid, let's go. And then you'll learn faster that way. You'll be able to fix things faster. And it becomes tangible too. You see things. You know, when you're doing it hands-on, you're actually engaging in the solutions. You're able to actually, you know, really come up with new versions of that, you know, on the fly that are much. It just happens much quicker that way. And I think that was probably my main driver. Is I've got 3 kids. I don't want to just slow play this. I don't think any of us can slow play this anymore. And if there are common sense approaches that someone like I can, you know, that I can bring to the table, then that's what I'm going to do. And then bring together those that can help elevate it and be on the journey with me, you know, from there.
wonderful. Yeah. And that's a great connection with the question we often get from students or even from staff and community members. It's like, what skill do you all see are needed in the workplace? But it can be in the workplace, or it can be at a place you volunteer, or like the skills that you would say are kind of very important in 2024 to be part of that kind of climate. I don't like to use fight, the climate world or the climate community. Yeah, what will be the top skills, knowing that most of our students are mid-career, or people in the audience, I see videos now, we're all in our mid-career, and it's like, okay, how can I be a better citizen or a better student or do things differently to be part of that change? I don't know if we go in the same order, we can do the popcorn style.
I can jump in. Well, I think, as most people would probably know, nonprofits isn't the highest paying career to get into. Certainly not as high paying as banking and other sectors. But to me, it's just desire and passion. For example, I just previously was interviewing someone for one of our farm internships position, and they had 0 farming or gardening experience. But I thought, well, you know, good applications are hard to come by. So I thought, well, I'll just chat to him. And turns out there was just a lot of other things that he brought to the table. He was a journalist student, and we have a magazine, which is a real struggle because I'm always begging staff to write for it. And you know, just in other skills just came up in the conversation. And so to me, I always just look for the desire and passion. I don't always look for what the degree is, because I would suggest that most of the folks that work here, if they do have a degree in something, ends up not being what their job is, which is, you know, sounds kind of odd to say to university students. But you know, the other thing too that we find is that even though someone's may have a career in a certain sector, they just really, it's like the midlife crisis happens earlier and earlier, where one of the other students I'd interviewed had a degree in education, and realized after, you know, a few months teaching in the school that wasn't where they wanted to work. But here we work with students at our farms, and you can still have that teaching element, but you're not in a classroom. So I mentioned it before about this transferable skill idea, but just looking at, you know, what really drives you and what makes you passionate to show up to work is more important. And I think many of us have been in that situation where we've had a job, and you know, you just don't want to go to work for a number of reasons. So you know, job satisfaction, you know, is more and more prevalent in what people want when they look for work. And again, just really looking at what you really want to do. If you've got to show up at a job every single day, you know, you really want to be able to enjoy it. So that's kind of one thing that I would mention, or a few things, I guess.
Cindy, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to build off that wonderful answer from Judy. My brain is going about 6 different ways. First, I would say that as Judy pointed out, there is a huge gap in climate, especially for what, you know, the academics called knowledge mobilization and what I would call storytelling. So there's this huge space for writers and communicators Stuart was mentioning people having a hard time connecting the dots. That's where folks like us come in. So I would really encourage anyone here who's taking anything communications connected, especially if you're in the professional communications bachelor and master's at Royal Roads, or even the leadership, really think about your storytelling and communication skills and how they can help not just the movement as a whole, but also particular organizations, and you can really find your niche there. I came over knowing very little about climate, no more than the average person. This has been the most profound immersion. I'm actually in the process of hiring a communication specialist right now. We're at the offer stage, and the person who's probably going to be taking the role is somebody who's got, a bachelor's degree in kind of environmental science and a master's degree in journalism. That's the type of cross section of skills we're looking for. Now, you don't need to have that environmental science credential to work in this field. I sure don't have it, but environmental and climate training of any sort is really great. Particularly, I just finished a micro-credential here at UVic, or the first course of a micro-credential. So don't discount the micro-credentials and continuing studies courses that you can take through Royal Roads. They're fantastic. They're being taught by leaders in climate action. Just off the top of my head, Dr. Robin Cox is somebody you want to learn from. I learned enormously from her when I was a staff member at Royal Roads. So yeah, there's a real space there for storytellers. And the last thing that I would just like to quickly say before I throw it to Ali is there's a real sense of urgency within sustainability and climate action space, and I would urge everyone actually to dial it down a little bit. You'll exhaust yourself. Burnout is a real problem in climate spaces, particularly once you start to fully comprehend the enormity of the problem. It's normal to get into a stage of like, oh my God, there's nothing I can do about this. It's way far gone. I would suggest like taking a breath and dialing back the urgency. I can't fix the climate crisis, but I can help PICS better communicate its work. So I focus on what I can do rather than how overwhelming things are. And also like that helps me keep from overdoing it, because you'll burn yourself out. And if you're burnt out and sick, you can't help at all. So.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I know I've been working in this job for about 2 years and I'm starting to feel a little bit burnt out. So it is very important. But just to echo on what Judy and Cindy have said, which have all been, I totally agree on all those points. And I think there is a real need kind of for, intersectional skills. And I think lots of people that are in climate spaces have, come from forestry or agriculture, engineering, or whatever sectors, and like actually having these, micro credentials or credentials are great. But I think it's like where we get to that kind of diversity of backgrounds is where the magic really happens. And I know for myself, I spent most of my 20s like bartending and serving and traveling and like, jumping out of jobs. And I'm 30 now. When I was like 22, finishing my undergrad, all the kind of entry-level environmental jobs were very like remediation, site assessment kind of focused. And I'm like, I love nature, but I'm not an outdoorsy type of field work person. And so, I had a lot of years where I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm interested in this type of work. I'm kind of more interested in the social side. And I just kept trucking on. I didn't really know where I was going to end up. But now, fast forward to my current role, one of my best skills, and I think the things I bring to the table, is all those years working in restaurants and bars where I learned how to talk to people and I learned about different industries and people and perspectives. Yeah. And so, for years I thought, oh, I'm behind. I'm just serving. But that turned out to help me a ton. And, I was lucky to be able to travel quite a bit and do internships or volunteer roles in different places in the world. And that helped me immensely as well. So, yeah, just reiterating that it's not always the academic path that leads you to have these skills. And I think, Cindy, you mentioned Dr. Robin Cox, who was one of my professors. And one thing she said that really struck me was that, lots of the climate jobs and the green jobs that, well, we need probably don't exist yet, and we are going to have to create them. And, you know, I was laughing, I saw a job for that, I forget which consulting company, and it, you know, was a climate leadership role, and clearly some engineer had written it and had no idea. Like, they know they need a job, but like no clue what the skills are. So, you know, 5 years ago, I never would have applied for that job. But now I'm like, oh, you guys actually just need some help. So yeah, I think that there are lots of opportunities, and there's not, you know, one skill. But there's one thing I'll just share before I pass it over to Stuart. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, but she has this really great kind of tangible approach where to figure out what you can kind of do in this space, it's good to look at 3 different things. So where do you get at? So maybe it's talking to people, maybe it's organizing, maybe it's communication. Where's an intersection that you think needs support? So maybe it's food security in your community. And then what brings you joy? So that's a great one. If you're great at organizing a community garden, hey, you have an answer right there. So I'll just share this kind of Venn diagram if anyone wants to take a look, but that's a really great start if you're looking for something to do locally. And I'll stop there, Stuart.
So I come from the hospitality background as well, so I can totally relate to what you're saying there. I think it was, you know, just invaluable for me in terms of my ability to engage with people and deal with things in a fast-paced environment, multitasking, you know, just dealing with chaos, right, and being able to get through it. So what I find really interesting is, you know, everybody's touched on different aspects of you know, opportunities that are within this space, and I think it's really important to understand that there's no limitations here. You know, I can speak from my experience where we're developing a nonprofit piece. We've got for-profit business arms. We've got industrial scale projects that we're tackling. You know, we're doing all of these, and each one of them has opportunities for different skill sets. I tend to look for people with rounded skills, you know, where it's not just one specific, so that they can evolve within, because they may be coming on in one role, or I may be looking for one role and I might not even be communicating that role properly. And then you start seeing where they can actually help, you know, in other aspects of the business, and migrating towards certain. Sorry, I got a cat here that just keeps on. Sorry. But you know, just understanding that getting your foot in the doors is the first step, and opportunities come from it. There's complexity to this space. There's opportunity in this space. The storytelling is absolutely massive when it comes to communicating, you know, especially circular systems, but just the innovations and food systems of the future, and climate, and how you frame things really matters. And, you know, I found in my journey that hasn't been my strength. And so hiring for those areas of, you know, I don't want to call them weaknesses, but lack of strength to be able to help elevate the organization is extremely important. But there's opportunities in operations, communications, social media. There's electricians that we need. There's everything from trades all the way to you know, R&D and science and everything in between. So I'm less worried about the job opportunities of the future since I've started doing the work in trying to create businesses of the future. AI is disruptive, and I think there's a lot of concern over, you know, what that means towards job opportunities. I think that it's a great tool that can actually help enhance the work that we're doing and accelerate work when done in the right way. So yeah, I think anybody that's coming out of school right now that's, you know, unsure, you know, what to be applying for, follow your passion. Go there first. You follow your passion, where you feel that you want to fill your bucket with, the opportunities will come from there. Just deliver. You know, at the end of the day, you got to do the work.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And yeah, all that was shared too make me think of like updating our LinkedIn. I don't know why it came to mind. I think, Judy, when you say, oh, I forgot I got this and that. So that's a tip that I feel students, sometimes you do so much, student and even everyone here in the room, and we forget about it. So by sharing that story on LinkedIn, for example, will help as well employers to see it, right? Because I feel that LinkedIn, I don't think 10 years ago was a big thing, maybe, at least for me, but I feel that now everyone is on it. So that's a platform we can use to share our story and the good work we do in life. Like it doesn't have to be what you study or what you work in. And the next question I asked the panelists, and I have something to add that what we do at Railroads about it, but as a citizen, what simple tips do you recommend that can make a difference? Maybe one personal action or one community action people can take to take care of the planet. And it's built on exactly, Ali, what you shared. I volunteer with an organization called Regenerate BC, and we always present that framework of like, let's lead climate action, but what we care, but what we're good at as well. So that's a good one. And I want to say for Railroad students, we have the farm at Railroads. And I know some people were asking me before the panel here, how they can get involved. And thank you, Judy, for saying like, yeah, people can come and have no farming experience at all, right? Just having our hands in the soil twice a week at Railroad for free. You just come, meet other people and gain that little experience that then after you can talk to an employer or put on your resume. For example, there's some city grants. I don't know about everywhere in the world, but I know in Victoria, there's quite a few grants now to build a community garden, to have a zero waste event. Like there's those small $500 or $1,500 available for the summer. And a student, a recent graduate, I should say, just shared with me that he was in need of a place to garden for the summer, and he finally approached his church, who said, oh yeah, you can totally garden here. So it's always being creative, right? Making your connection in the community, and then things will happen. Yeah. So the question, sorry, back to it. What simple tips would you tell people here in the room? And then I'll go to the chat for more questions.
I think I have the easy one, so maybe I'll start if that's okay. Interrogate how you travel. This is a hard one for people, but it's simple. We're not going to get more public transit until we start using the public transit we've got, no matter how crummy it might be. This is a real commitment. I sometimes need to take 3 buses one way to get to work from where I live. I live out in the suburbs. I live in Langford. I work at UVic hybrid. So yeah, it's tough, but download the transit app. Really think about, can you do 1 day a week on a bus? You know, if you're a multiple car family, is it possible to go down to 1? The answer might be no, but I really encourage people to deeply interrogate how they get around. You know, could you buy an e-bike secondhand? Just really think about it.
I can follow up on that. That's a great start. I also, this is a bit of a sticky one for me because I see there's so many things that I think largely come from greenwashing that put the burden on individual people to make these grand changes. And I've grappled with this a lot. Obviously, I work in climate change, but you know, I love shopping, I love traveling, and I think you can do both. So I thought Nancy gave us these questions before, and I thought about them quite a bit. And there's 3 things. I'll try to talk really quickly. The first one I want to say is just to vote. You know, I think when we talk about environmentalism and climate action, you know, it's all of a sudden this huge thing of like, I need to stop flying and I need to like somehow like stop the fossil fuel industry, which that's just not feasible, right? But you know, taking a few minutes and going out to vote is like a really simple action. And you know, I'm blanking on the stat now, but then the kind of like millennial and Gen Z generations, there's a lot of people there that have voting power and you know could make some changes. So that's the first one. Secondly, surveys. I always thought surveys were kind of just one of those things that no one, I don't know, they just existed. I hadn't really thought about it. Now within my job, and I forgot to mention this, but so the Métis Nation is the Métis government in Alberta and serves 70,000 Métis citizens. and the Métis Nation doesn't have a land base. So we have 70,000 citizens spread across Alberta, and lots of my job is going out to talk to people. And which is, I spend a lot of time on the roads, but surveys are a really great way to also reach a lot of people. And so many companies use surveys, and there's someone like me at the other end of the survey gathering all of that information and creating programs and policies based on it. So you might, like the other day I was at my grocery store and I was so annoyed. There was not a single pasta in the pasta aisle that wasn't in a plastic bag or didn't have like a little plastic window in the cardboard box. So I got my receipt and I saw there's a share your feedback. You could win $1,000. And I went online and I emailed them and said, hey, can you source like pasta that's in a, recyclable container? And like, not to say that's changing the world, but when you see surveys, there's so many companies that have social media or have communications teams that like read the information on the other end. So, one small thing might not make a difference, but if enough people do it, maybe it will. And then finally, the last thing is just, Nancy, you talked about this kind of at a community scale, but we're at the point where we know climate change is real. We know that we are seeing, a higher incidence of climate related emergencies. Cindy, you mentioned the heat dome, that was massive, right? And so one tangible thing, or I guess the third thing is if you have the chance to go out and just meet some of your neighbors, talk to someone in the hallway of your apartment building, maybe see any potentially vulnerable folks in your community, maybe any seniors, families with young kids, like say hello. There's research that shows that like those are your biggest allies if something happens, if there's an evacuation. So, just taking the time to say hello, maybe, have a barbecue, have a beer, whatever it is. Because in those situations, then you're one step ahead of, who might need support and also who might be able to lend a hand, kind of unfortunately when the next thing does happen.
I love this. Thank you, Ellie. There I was trying to get a little bit away from communication and you went right there. I just want to add very, very quickly. I just finished a course here at UVic on climate action, Introduction to the Human Dimensions of Climate Change. And my final project was actually building a presentation for my strata council. I just moved into a new house, new to us. And I'm going to try to convince my strata of 66 units to basically become a climate resilient community together. And the first step is knowing who will need help when and who has what. So the first thing I'm going to propose is, who has babies in the house, who has small children, who has elders, who will need help during, heat or cold or an outage, who's got Jennies and are willing to generators and willing to share, that kind of thing, and then eventually into more bulk buying options for heat pumps and whatnot. But your small community is in disasters, it's small communities that are well organized, that do well, that don't have as disastrous an outcome as others. And you saw that with the heat dome. People who were organized survived, even people who were very poor and very limited in their means. People who didn't have support systems unfortunately often died.
Okay, that was ended on a tough note, but I will. I'm just gonna make it really quick. I know we're running out of time. So for us, it's just like obviously just grow anything. If you can't grow anything, support your local farmers. If that's too expensive, volunteer. Volunteering is a great way. There's lots of like little urban farms that will, if you go and weed for a couple hours, you can take a bag of veggies. So volunteer at a farm or in an organization that grows food, and they'll share the food with you.
Yeah, the little things that you do at home, I think they add up. Turning off your water, don't letting it run. Composting if you can, gardening. There's a mental therapy that goes along with it as well as the physical. When you get your hands in the soil, you get the microbes. It's amazing what that actually does for you. I do appreciate the community element of this. I think that through climate change, there's going to be disruptions. It's important that we start seeing our communities for what they are, which is our extended family potentially, especially during disasters. And it's not okay to just all of a sudden, when something goes wrong, then reach out, because there is no personal interaction and connection at that stage. I think it's imperative that we get to know our neighbors. It goes along the lines of that localized food security and ensuring that we're utilizing resources differently. Yes, you can push your stratas to adopt certain measures so that you're prepared. It can go back to all the way to the recycling system. Some of the areas that we're tackling at ReFeed are that industrial scale, which really at the end of the day, that's the infrastructure. Those are the systems that really need to be changed at the top. But it starts at that community level. We have the power to demand these things. We just have to organize, and we have to make it known. We have to vocalize it. Solutions are out there, and I think that's what I've experienced the most over the last 4 years since I started ReFeed, is that the solutions are there. They just need to be brought together and funded properly, and organizations like ReFeed and others are working to do that, to find innovative ways of generating revenues, to be able to make them sustainable, and to get that momentum. At a smaller scale in our communities, we can be doing that in order to influence stakeholders that will be making those bigger decisions, and that includes municipal government, private organizations. But yeah, start in your community. Do common sense things, right?
So true, yeah. And for those of us who are students, and I know we can make mistakes and try stuff all throughout our career, but I feel that when we're student, this is the time to experiment and try stuff. And maybe a small project won't work, and then you pivot and you iterate and then you change it. So I feel that this is something we don't talk about enough. It's like, give it a try, and if that doesn't work, then you'll just learn and move forward. Yes, Cindy?
I just wanted to add, because we are talking to students and some of you will be very involved in probably social media and just creative media generally in your lives. That set of skills, the ability to make a catchy TikTok video, the ability to do an Instagram reel that looks really solid, desperately needed in the climate action space. Desperately needed.
And that ReFeed.
Yeah, and and like, you can volunteer to get experience in that. I know that eventually I'll be hiring a social media coordinator, not this quarter, but eventually in the next year or two, simply because I can't keep up with all of the communications work here and do really effective social media. I know how, but I'm one person at this point. So if you've got those skills, that is a real jumping off spot into the climate action space. And you can see, if you're looking at, oh, what could I do with that? There are so many different versions. You can go everywhere from the Canadian Climate Institute, which makes these really fantastic data visualizations, and then they make social media out of them, to like much more hands-on kind of TikTok stuff that you'll see with more grassroots organizations. But yeah, a lot of people need help in that realm.
Wonderful, yeah. And a quick thing that student can do is write down your name, and all of you, and follow you on LinkedIn, for example, and see all the good works you're doing, and then any opportunities that will, as you mentioned, come up in the coming months or years. Yeah, thank you so much. I know that some student wanted to ask question maybe off camera, so I might stop the recording and give us like a 5 minutes networking, and if we need breakout room, we can do that. So a huge thank you for all of you, of course, Ali, Stuart, Cindy, and Judy. Like, thank you for jumping in. I feel very grateful to know you now, and just like, yeah, that you took 60 minutes of your busy time to be with us. Thank you for everyone in the attendees. In the attendance, I should say. Sometimes I lose my English as I go. I'm too emotional right now. I just love the conversation we had. Thank you for students, and thank you for people in my team that are supporting behind the scenes. So I'll stop the recording, and we can stay on for a few minutes. Thank you. Here we go.